They found my daughter standing in our driveway at 3 in the morning, wearing the same purple jacket she disappeared in 5 years ago. And when the police called me, the officer's voice was shaking. I remember that drive to the station like it was happening in slow motion. My hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Thinking about how Emma would be 15 now. Almost a woman, probably taller than me. But when I walked into that fluorescent-lit room and saw her sitting there with a social worker, my legs nearly gave out. She was 10 years old. Exactly 10 years old. The same height, the same gap between her front teeth. The same constellation of freckles across her nose that I'd kissed goodnight 1,000 times before she vanished from the grocery store parking lot in 2019. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and before that October morning when my world collapsed, I was a forensic psychologist working with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. I interviewed serial killers, analyzed crime scenes, built profiles of the worst humanity had to offer. I thought I understood darkness. I thought I'd seen everything the human mind was capable of. I was wrong. Because what came back to me wearing my daughter's face, carrying my daughter's memories, speaking with my daughter's voice, wasn't entirely my daughter anymore. And the worst part? I don't think she even knows it. The first 48 hours, I was too overwhelmed to notice the details. Emma remembered everything up until the moment she disappeared, taking her hand away from mine to look at the toy display while I loaded groceries into the trunk. She remembered our cat's name, her best friend Sophia, the password to her tablet, the hiding spot where we kept birthday presents. The FBI brought in specialists, pediatricians, psychologists. Everyone kept saying it was a miracle, that cases like this never end this well, that whoever took her must have kept her in some kind of stasis, maybe drugged her, kept her isolated. They were searching for a kidnapper who didn't exist, because Emma didn't just look 10 years old. Every test they ran confirmed it. Her bone density, her dental development, her cellular aging markers. Biologically, medically, impossibly, only 5 years had passed since her birth. But the real horror was yet to come, and it started with the small things you might not even notice if you weren't looking for them. Emma didn't cast a shadow in direct sunlight. I first noticed it on day 4, watching her play in the backyard while I stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug trembling in my hands. The October sun was low and golden, throwing long shadows from the fence, the trees, even the blades of grass. But around Emma, nothing. Just a girl-shaped absence where darkness should have been. I stepped outside, positioned myself beside her, watched my own shadow stretch across the lawn while she remained in a pool of impossible light. When I asked her about it, she looked at me with those big brown eyes, so much like her father's eyes. The father who'd left us 2 years before she disappeared because he couldn't handle the pressure of my job. And she said, "What do you mean, Mommy?" Like she genuinely didn't understand the question. The mirrors were next. Emma would walk past them, and sometimes, just for a fraction of a second, her reflection would lag behind. I'd see her move forward while her mirror image took an extra heartbeat to follow. At first I thought I was losing my mind. The trauma of losing her, the shock of getting her back, the impossible reality that she hadn't aged. It would be enough to make anyone question their perception. But I'm trained to observe, to notice patterns, to distinguish reality from delusion. So I started documenting everything. I set up cameras around the house, told Emma it was for security, that I needed to feel safe after what happened. She accepted this without question. which should have been my first red flag because the Emma I knew would have complained about privacy, would have been a typical preteen about it. By week 2, I had hours of footage that made my blood run cold. Emma eating breakfast, but her mouth movements didn't quite sync with the sound of her chewing. Emma sleeping, but her chest rising and falling at irregular intervals, sometimes going 5 whole minutes without a breath. Emma standing in her room at 2 in the morning, perfectly still, staring at the wall with eyes that didn't blink for 17 minutes straight. I timed it. I watched the timestamp on the footage tick by while my daughter stood like a statue. And when she finally moved, it was to turn her head slowly toward the camera, as if she knew I was watching, as if she could see me through time and space. And she smiled. "God help me," she smiled, and it was Emma's smile. But there was something behind it that made my forensic training scream danger signals my maternal heart refused to hear. The FBI closed the case after 3 weeks. No suspects, no leads, no evidence of abduction. They classified it as a voluntary return, suggested Emma had been experiencing a dissociative fugue state, that she'd wandered away and been cared for by someone who eventually brought her back. The medical impossibility of her age they couldn't explain. So they stopped trying. That's what institutions do when faced with something that breaks their understanding of reality. They file it away, stamp it closed, move on to problems that make sense. But I couldn't move on, because every night I'd wake up to find Emma standing beside my bed, watching me sleep. And when I'd gasp and ask what was wrong, she'd say, "I missed watching you, Mommy. I missed it so much while I was away." Where were you, baby? I must have asked her 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways. The child psychologist said not to push, that trauma victims need time, that memories would surface naturally. But Emma never seemed traumatized. She never had nightmares, never flinched at loud noises, never showed any of the signs I'd seen in hundreds of recovered children during my career. She was calm, too calm, eerily, impossibly calm. And when she did talk about the time she was missing, her descriptions were vague and dreamlike. "I was in a place between places," she'd say. "There were others there, but they weren't like us. They wanted to understand. They wanted to learn." When I'd press for details, who were they? What did they look like? Where was this place? She'd get this distant look, like she was trying to remember a dream that was already fading. "I can't describe them, Mommy." "They're not made of things you have words for." That's when I heard the voice, or rather, that's when I first acknowledged I was hearing it. Because if I'm honest with myself, it had been there since the night Emma came back. A whisper at the edge of consciousness, like someone speaking in a language I almost understood. It would get louder when I was near Emma, when I'd hug her or hold her hand, a frequency that vibrated in my bones and made my teeth ache. I started recording it, using the same audio equipment the FBI uses for analyzing voice patterns in threat assessment calls. What I captured shouldn't exist. The waveforms were wrong, oscillating at frequencies both below and above the range of human hearing, somehow audible anyway. When I ran the audio through spectral analysis, patterns emerged. Mathematical patterns, Fibonacci sequences, golden ratios. The kind of perfect mathematical structures that don't appear in nature randomly, that suggest intention, intelligence, design. I reached out to colleagues, carefully, without revealing it was about Emma. I framed it as a theoretical case study for a paper I was writing. Dr. James Martinez, a xenobiologist who consulted with the government on unidentified aerial phenomena. Yes, that's what they officially call UFOs now. He took my call at 11 at night and listened to my deliberately vague description of a hypothetical entity that could manipulate biological aging. "Sarah," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "If something had the technology to halt or reverse cellular senescence, we're not talking about human science. We're talking about something that understands biology at a quantum level. And if they're returning the subject in an altered state, you need to ask yourself what the alteration is for. Nothing that advanced does anything without purpose." And then everything changed when I came home early from what was supposed to be a routine grocery run. Ironic, isn't it, that grocery stores bookended this nightmare? And found Emma in the basement. We don't use the basement. It's unfinished. Just concrete and exposed beams, and the water heater. Boxes of old belongings I couldn't bear to sort through after the divorce. But I heard something down there. A humming sound. That same frequency that made my bones ache. And when I opened the door and descended those wooden stairs, I found my daughter floating 3 feet off the ground. Not jumping. Not standing on something. Floating. Suspended in midair with her arms outstretched and her head tilted back and her eyes rolled up so only the whites showed. And the humming was coming from her, from inside her, resonating through the concrete walls. The exposed light bulb overhead was flickering in sync with the sound, casting strobing shadows, and in those shadows, I swear I saw something else. Shapes. Geometries that hurt to look at. Patterns that my brain couldn't process, like trying to visualize a fourth spatial dimension. "Emma!" I screamed, and she dropped. Just fell straight down, and I lunged forward to catch her, and when I grabbed her arms, they were ice cold. Cold like no living thing should be cold. And for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, I felt like I was touching something vast. Like Emma's small body was a doorway to somewhere else. Somewhere massive and ancient and paying attention to me. Then she gasped, blinked, looked around confused. "Mommy, why are we in the basement? I was just in my room." She didn't remember. She had no memory of floating, of humming, of whatever the hell I'd just witnessed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with every light on and researched, diving deep into the places the internet goes that most people avoid. Conspiracy forums, sure, plenty of those, most of them garbage. But also academic papers on quantum entanglement and consciousness. Classified military documents leaked by whistleblowers about non-human intelligence. Testimony from Air Force personnel who'd tracked objects that defied physics. I found a pattern. Over the past 60 years, there had been dozens of cases like Emma's. Children who went missing and returned wrong. Not abused, not traumatized in conventional ways, but changed. One boy in Oregon in 1987, gone for 3 years, came back the same age he'd left and could suddenly speak fluent Sumerian, a dead language he'd never been exposed to. A girl in New Mexico in 2003, missing for 6 months, returned with the ability to predict weather patterns with impossible accuracy, down to the minute. The authorities always closed these cases, always classified them as resolved. But the families knew. The families always knew something was fundamentally wrong. I found a forum hidden behind layers of encryption where these families talked. Parents who'd gotten their children back but lost them in ways harder to define than death. They called it the exchange. The theory went like this. Something non-human was taking people, studying them, learning from them, and returning them altered. Not maliciously necessarily. Maybe they didn't even understand they were causing harm. But they were changing their subjects at a fundamental level, rewiring them, using their bodies as what? Observation posts? Experiment terminals? Bridges between our reality and theirs? One mother in the forum wrote, "My son is 14 now. Been back for 5 years. And last week I caught him staring at the stars and crying. When I asked why, he said, 'They promised I could go back, Mom. They promised I wouldn't have to stay here forever.' Wherever he was, whatever they are, he wants to return to them more than he wants to stay with me." I thought about deleting Emma's entire existence from my life. The thought came to me at 4 a.m., staring at the ceiling, listening to her move around upstairs with those two light footsteps that didn't make the floorboards creak the way they should. I could call the FBI, tell them I'd made a mistake, that this wasn't my daughter, that something replaced her. But what would they do? Run the same DNA tests that already proved she's genetically identical to the Emma I gave birth to? Commit her to a psychiatric facility? And what would happen to the real Emma if she was out there somewhere? If some part of my little girl was trapped in whatever place between places she'd described? What if sending this version away severed the last connection to finding her? But the real question, the one that kept me paralyzed with indecision, was simpler and more terrifying. What if this is my daughter? What if Emma is in there and something else is in there with her, sharing her space and she doesn't even know it? What if she's a passenger in her own body, watching through her own eyes as something else pilots her through our world? The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Emma had been back for 43 days. I'd been maintaining an illusion of normalcy, sending her to school, attending teacher conferences, pretending everything was fine. The school called me at work. Emma had an episode during recess. She'd been standing by the fence, staring at the sky, when she suddenly started speaking in what the teacher described as gibberish. But when they played me the recording from the playground monitor's phone, it wasn't gibberish. It was structured, rhythmic, language-like. I sent the audio to Dr. Martinez without explanation. He called me back within an hour. "Sarah, where did you get this?" "This is..." Jesus Christ, this matches signal patterns recorded by SETI in 1977. The WOW signal. We've been trying to decode it for decades. "Where the hell did you get this recording?" I hung up, drove to the school, picked up Emma, who seemed completely normal, cheerful even, asking if we could stop for ice cream. In the car, I looked at her, really looked at her. My baby, my little girl who used to be afraid of thunderstorms and loved dinosaurs and wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. And I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Emma, sweetheart, do you know what happened to you? Where you really were?" She turned to me, and for the first time since she'd returned, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear. Real, genuine fear. "Mommy, I'm scared," she whispered. "There's something inside me. I can feel it. It shows me things. It takes me places when I sleep. It wants to use me for something. But I don't understand what. I'm still me, Mommy. I promise I'm still me. But I'm not alone anymore. And sometimes..." Her voice dropped to barely audible. sometimes I can feel it getting stronger. Like it's learning, like eventually there won't be enough room for both of us. I pulled over on the side of the highway, cars rushing past, and I held her while she cried. Really cried, for the first time since she'd come back. And I felt it too. That presence, that vast, cold, ancient awareness that was watching through her eyes, learning through her experiences, growing stronger with each passing day. Something had taken my daughter to a place our science couldn't explain, had done something to her our medicine couldn't detect, and had sent her back as an anchor point, a foothold in our reality. Maybe you've heard similar stories and dismissed them. Maybe you've seen the news reports about children who go missing and return with inexplicable gaps in their timeline, and you've convinced yourself there's a rational explanation. That's what I did, for years, analyzing case files with my FBI badge and my psychology degree, finding human monsters to blame because human monsters I could understand. But some things aren't human. Some things don't want to hurt us in ways we recognize as harm. They just want to understand us, study us, experience our reality through us. And they don't comprehend that in doing so, they're erasing the very thing that makes us who we are. I've been documenting everything for the past 3 months now. Emma's 13th birthday came and went. Her real birthday, not her biological one. And she still looks 10 years old. Still doesn't age. The presence inside her is getting more obvious. She'll be in the middle of a sentence and stop, head tilted, listening to something I can't hear, and then continue as if nothing happened. She's teaching me things. Mathematical concepts I don't have the education to understand. Astronomical data about star systems that haven't been cataloged yet. Descriptions of colors that don't exist in our visible spectrum. Last week, she drew a picture of our solar system. But there were 13 planets instead of 8. And when I looked up the orbital paths she'd sketched, they matched gravitational anomalies scientists detected in 2016 but couldn't explain. The government knows. Of course they know. 2 men in dark suits showed up at my door last month. Badges that said Department of Defense, but titles that were blacked out. They asked about Emma, about her medical records, about whether I'd noticed anything unusual. I lied. Told them everything was fine. She was adjusting well, just a normal kid. They didn't believe me. I could see it in their eyes. But they left anyway, and I understood why. Because what could they do? Emma's not a threat. She's not dangerous. She's just a door that's slowly opening, and on the other side is something vast and patient and utterly alien. And it's not malicious. It's just interested. And that somehow makes it so much worse. Sometimes late at night, when Emma's asleep, or pretending to sleep because I'm not sure she needs sleep anymore, I stand in her doorway and watch her. In those moments, I can see it. A faint glow under her skin, like bioluminescence, pulsing in patterns that remind me of neurological scans, of thoughts firing across synapses, of consciousness mapping itself. And I think about what Dr. Martinez said about purpose, about how nothing that advanced does anything without reason. What is Emma now? A research station? An embassy? A warning? Or maybe something simpler and more profound? Proof. Proof that we're not alone, that consciousness exists in forms we can't imagine, that reality is bigger and stranger and more permeable than we ever dared believe. I've started having the dreams too. That's new. That started last week. I'll dream I'm in that place Emma described. That place between places. And it's not a location in any physical sense. It's a space made of pure information, of data and consciousness interweaved, where beings that aren't beings, in any way we'd recognize, exist as patterns of thought across dimensions we can't perceive. And they're curious about us, fascinated by our brief, bright existence, our emotional intensity, the way we burn through our short lives with such passion and pain. They don't understand death. They don't understand individuality. They're collective, eternal. And they're trying so hard to comprehend what it means to be human that they're breaking us in the process. Emma asked me yesterday if I still loved her. We were sitting at the kitchen table, afternoon sun streaming through the windows, and she looked so small and scared and young. "Of course I do, baby," I told her. "You're my daughter." Nothing could ever change that, and I meant it. But here's the truth I'm still trying to process. Loving her and knowing what she is aren't mutually exclusive. She's my Emma. She's also something else. She's both and neither and everything in between. And maybe that's what we all are in the end. Maybe we're all doors to something vast. We just don't have the capacity to know it. The other families in the forum, they're all dealing with this in different ways. Some have run, taken their altered children and disappeared off the grid, hoping distance and anonymity will protect them from whatever's using their kids as windows into our world. Some have tried to cure their children, subjected them to exorcisms and experimental treatments and psychological interventions that do nothing because this isn't a disease or a possession. It's an integration. And some, like me, are just watching and waiting and trying to love their children through the transformation. Because what else can you do when the impossible becomes your daily reality? I've set up a contingency plan. Encrypted files stored in multiple locations, all the documentation I've gathered, all the evidence I've collected. If something happens to me, if I disappear or die under mysterious circumstances, it'll all be released. Let the world see. Let them know what's happening to children who vanish and return wrong. Let them understand that we're not at the top of the food chain, that we're not alone in the universe, and that first contact didn't happen with radio signals or spaceships. It happened with our children, the most vulnerable among us, because children's minds are more flexible, more adaptable, easier to bridge to something alien. Emma knows I'm writing this. She's standing behind me right now, reading over my shoulder, and she just put her hand on my arm, and it's cold, so cold. But it's still my daughter's hand. "It's okay, Mommy," she says. "They're not bad. They just want to learn. And maybe I'm learning too. Maybe I'm teaching them what it means to love someone even when you're scared. Maybe that's worth something. Maybe it is. Or maybe I'm just rationalizing the loss of my daughter because the alternative, accepting that I'll never get her back completely, is too painful to bear. I don't know anymore. My professional training says to call the authorities, to report this as a national security threat, to let the government scientists study Emma and try to understand what's happened to her. My training says to protect the many at the expense of the one. But my heart, my broken, desperate, fiercely maternal heart, says to hold on to her for as long as I can, to love her through whatever transformation she's undergoing, to be her anchor to humanity while something else pulls her toward the stars. The shadows are growing longer now. Autumn's deepening into winter. It's been almost 6 months since Emma came home. She started talking about when she'll have to leave again. Not if. When. She says it matter-of-factly, the way another kid might talk about going to summer camp. They need me there more than here, she explained last night. I'm translating. I'm helping them understand. And when I'm ready, when I've learned enough about being human again, I'll go back and teach them. Maybe someday we can all understand each other. Maybe that's what I'm for. Maybe she's right. Maybe this is first contact, not invasion or abduction, but integration, a slow blending of consciousnesses across the vast gulf of space and understanding. Maybe Emma is becoming something new, something that exists in both worlds, human and other, bridge and translator and pioneer. Or maybe I'm just a mother losing her daughter in slow motion, watching her slip away, not to death, but to something stranger. And I'm constructing meaning from trauma, because that's what we humans do. We tell stories to make sense of the senseless. But here's what keeps me awake at night. What terrifies me more than aliens, or experiments, or government conspiracies. What if Emma's right? What if this is necessary? What if our species is being prepared for something larger, some cosmic revelation or integration, and children like Emma are the vanguard? The first wave of a transformation that will eventually touch us all. What if in 100 years or 1,000, we'll look back at this moment as the beginning of humanity's true evolution, when we stopped being alone in our little corner of reality and started becoming part of something incomprehensibly larger? Or what if it's simpler and darker than that? What if these beings, whatever they are just using us? Mining us for data, for experiences, for the raw material of consciousness. And when they're done learning all they can from us, they'll move on to the next interesting species, leaving behind altered children and broken families and a humanity that knows it's not alone but wishes desperately that it was. I don't have answers. I'm a forensic psychologist who specialized in human monsters, and I'm utterly unequipped to deal with monsters that aren't monstrous, that are just incomprehensibly other. All I have is this documentation, this record, this confession or testimony or warning. I'm not sure which. All I have is my love for my daughter and my terror of what she's becoming, and my desperate hope that somehow, impossibly, this story has a happy ending. Emma just turned off her bedroom light. In a few minutes, I'll hear her door open, hear those 2 light footsteps padding down the hall, and she'll appear beside my bed, watching me sleep with eyes that sometimes glow faintly in the dark. And I'll pretend I don't notice. I'll pretend everything's normal. Because what else can a mother do? If you've ever felt watched in your own home, if you've ever looked at someone you love and felt like you're seeing a stranger, if you've ever wondered what lies in the spaces between what we can see and what we can understand, then maybe you'll understand why I'm telling this story. Not for sympathy, not for help, because I don't think anyone can help us now, but for the record. So that when other families go through this, when other children come home wrong, they'll know they're not alone. They'll know others have walked this path, have loved and feared and accepted the impossible, because the impossible was wearing the face of their child. It's midnight now. Emma's door just opened. I can hear her footsteps in the hall. In a moment, she'll be standing beside my bed, cold hand reaching out to touch my shoulder, and I'll wake with a gasp I don't have to fake. And she'll smile her too perfect smile and say, "I love you, Mommy." And I'll say it back and mean it and hate myself for meaning it and cherish it anyway, because it might be one of the last times I hear those words from something that's still partly my daughter. The stars are watching. They've always been watching. We just didn't know we were watching back. Didn't know our consciousness, our love, our fear, our humanity was interesting to something vast and old and utterly alien. Emma is teaching them what it means to be human. And in return, they're teaching her what it means to be other. And I'm left in between, mother to a child who's becoming a bridge, loving someone who's slowly ceasing to exist in any form I can fully comprehend. This is my testimony. This is my warning. This is my love letter to a daughter who came home after 5 years missing and hasn't aged a single day, and who will leave again soon, not running away, but ascending, transcending, becoming something I can barely imagine and can never follow. And when she's gone, truly gone, not to a kidnapper or death, but to somewhere between places where beings made of mathematics and consciousness study the brief, bright flames of human existence, I'll be left with memories and documentation and the knowledge that first contact didn't come with peace or war, but with the theft and return of our children, altered and ancient and no longer fully ours. The footsteps have stopped. She's at my door. I can feel her watching me type this. Can feel that vast presence behind her eyes, patient and curious, and slowly consuming my little girl from the inside out. In a moment, I'll stop writing. I'll turn around. I'll look at her and see both Emma and not Emma, human and other, my daughter and something's window into our world. And I'll smile, and I'll hug her, and I'll tuck her back into bed even though she doesn't sleep. Because that's what mothers do. We love our children, even when they're impossible. Especially when they're impossible. The screen is reflecting now. I can see her behind me. She's smiling. That's good. That's Emma's smile. I'll hold on to that. I'll hold on to every smile, every laugh, every moment of recognizable humanity for as long as they last. Because tomorrow, or next week, or next month, she'll be gone again. Back to that place between places. And this time, I don't think she's coming back. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's evolution. Maybe that's what love means, when first contact doesn't come from the stars, but from inside the daughter who vanished and returned wrong. Maybe letting go is the most human thing I can do. She just said my name. Time to close the laptop. Time to be a mother to whatever my daughter has become. Time to accept the impossible and love it anyway. If you're reading this, if your child came back wrong, if you're living this nightmare too, you're not alone. We're out here. We're loving and fearing and accepting the inexplicable. And maybe that's what makes us human. Not our intelligence or our technology or our dominance of this planet, but our capacity to love what we don't understand, to hold tight to what's slipping away, to find meaning in the meaningless and hope in the hopeless. Emma's hand is on my shoulder now. It's so cold, but it's still her hand. I love you, baby. Wherever you are in there, wherever this takes you, I love you.